And yes, all generations.
All Souls Tulsa and All Souls Everywhere members try to live out what we call love beyond belief.
Bring your whole self each week to our worship services, Humanist Hour, and programs for families and adults.
Empower your children with a religious education that helps them make their own decisions about what they believe.
Connect and learn from our community of diverse experiences, faith, and cultures.
Sing with others in one of our many choirs.
Explore your creativity and find healing in the chapter of your life that you're in right now.
At All Souls, our members care for each other through the highs and the lows of our lives.
Live out love beyond belief here in Tulsa, across our nation, and around the world.
Join us. Become a member of the All Souls family in our centennial year.
At All Souls, our members care for each other through the joys and the sorrows of life.
All Souls Tulsa and All Souls Everywhere.
Join today at allsoulschurch.org.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Ms. Goza is concertmaster of the Tulsa Symphony Orchestra. It's so wonderful to have you with us here this morning. Good morning to you. Good morning to all of you on this first Sunday in March. My name is Barbara Prose. I'm your executive minister, and it's really heartwarming, even at this heartbreaking time in history, to be here in the sanctuary with all of you. This is my first time back in the sanctuary since people have been welcomed back in, and it's amazing to actually be with you in person. We have some amazing guestry this morning. I see Professor Xenia Kish, who I'll introduce in just a minute. They say March comes in like a lion and goes out like a lamb, so may that be true. Xenia Kish is with us. She will, in a few minutes, share a children's story and some of her own personal stories. She is of Ukrainian descent. She's professor of media studies at the University of Tulsa. Actually, I'll do that in just a minute. I'll tell you more about her in just a minute before she speaks. But gather around online. Welcome to you online. Gather your children around for the story, which is coming soon. If you are new and visiting with us for the first time here in the sanctuary or on Zoom or Facebook or Roku or on our website, please take a moment to fill out a Connect card, which you can find in the back of the pew in front of you, or you can click on the link online, and please start sharing your joys and your sorrows and your prayers. We'll be lighting candles in a little while, and Reverend Davis, who is here, will be praying with us. I'm so happy to greet you. Why don't you stand for a moment and greet each other? Remain standing. Please remain standing as Reverend Davis shares our morning invocation and covenant.
Well, I understand we haven't been together in a long time, but give me a moment, will you? I get to say great words like this. Good morning, church.
Good morning.
This is indeed a day that God has made. Let us then rejoice in it and be glad. And let us count our many blessings. We are grateful for the capacity to see, hear, feel, and understand. We are grateful for the incredible gift of life. And we are especially grateful for the ties of love which bind us together, giving dignity, meaning, worth, and joy to all our days. Please join me in our covenant. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek the truth in love, and to help one another. Welcome to All Souls, where we love beyond belief.
From all that dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue.
You can please be seated and direct your attention to the wall, where in just a minute we'll have our chalice lighting. Thank you to Eric Wolf and Caroline Guerra Wolf, who with their 2.5-year-old son, Leo, are celebrating their 5th anniversary this week. So thank you so much, Eric and Caroline.
The chalice is a symbol that was crafted more than a generation ago in a time of fear and violence and division in Europe. It quickly became a source of hope and freedom for many people. So may it be for us today. As we light our chalice this morning, we do it for the people of Ukraine and are reminded by this flame of the courage required for the triumph of freedom.
Now I have the honor of introducing Xenia Kish to you. She is a professor of media studies at the University of Tulsa, where she teaches courses on global media, digital media, and climate change. She grew up in Canada, where she is part of the largest Ukrainian diaspora outside of Ukraine and Russia. She came to the United States to do her PhD studies and has since started a family here. Little Maxime just turned 1 yesterday. You can clap for that, Mom. Yeah, Grandma. I know her because she sits on the board of El Centro New Sanctuary Empowerment Center, where as a descendant of refugees, she prioritizes serving new immigrants. That is the vision and mission of El Centro, to honor and protect the rights of all immigrants and migrants here in Tulsa. So it's a great honor and joy to ask Dr. Professor Kish to come forward and share a story. Yes, please.
Thank you very much for inviting me to join you here today. I'm very excited to meet all of you and join All Souls for the first time. So my name is Zhenya Kish, and as Reverend Barbara told you, I am a Ukrainian Canadian. I'm descended from refugees who came to Canada in 2 waves. On one side of my family, fleeing the aftermath of World War I in Ukraine, and then on the other side of my family, refugees from World War II. So I grew up hearing stories about the different parts of my family having to make these very difficult journeys, fleeing their home and their families and everything they knew, making very difficult, long treks, often against their choice or will, and finding new ways to settle and make home and make new families and connections in Canada. These are stories that I partly understood and had some strong feelings about when I was a little child. But the longer I've grown up and sat with them and let them grow inside of me, they continue to change who I am, and I continue to find new meaning in them, especially now that I have a young son, and I myself have immigrated to the United States. I became a citizen here last year. And so one thing I want to share with all of you, especially the children joining us today, is that many of the stories you hear now might have a certain meaning and talk to you in a particular way at this moment, but hold on to them. And the longer you think about them with your mind and hold them in your hearts, they can continue to teach you in new ways as you grow up and move through different phases of your life. And so these stories that you hear now, they're part of who you are, and they will continue to be part of who you are as you grow and become the people that you will continue to be. So when I was a child, my parents sent me to Ukrainian school every week, and I was a little reluctant about it. Why do I have to go to Ukrainian school? I learn this language that I don't really speak anywhere else, and it's hard, and it's a different alphabet. And so I as many children do, you get thrown into situations that you try and make the best of, even if it's not your first choice. And I learned how to play the bandura, the national instrument of Ukraine, which is this giant, it was as big as me, I'm sure, when I started playing at age 5 or 6. It's kind of a cross between a harp and a lute, but it actually sits in your lap unlike a harp. And it has, the modern version has 68 strings. So I was playing this big thing and trying to learn Ukrainian songs. And I learned Ukrainian folk tales and nursery rhymes and things like that. And some of the lessons that I learned from my experience in Ukrainian school about Ukrainian culture and tradition is, first of all, that storytelling is very central to who we are, to our culture, and to sharing our culture across generations. And second of all, that Ukrainians, like many, have very strong connections to the land. I am descended from peasants who worked farms, and that's what they knew, and that's what shaped their worldview and shaped their culture and shaped their stories. So Ukraine, you may be hearing a lot about it in the news these days. Ukraine is often referred to as a breadbasket, feeding much of Europe and now much of our globalized world. So what's happening now in Ukraine is having very dire impacts on bread and food markets in Egypt, for instance, and other parts of the Middle East that are very reliant on Ukrainian and Russian wheat exports. And so Ukraine is known as this place with very rich, fertile soil, and that is central to how Ukrainians narrate our culture. So I always thought it was a fun trivia fact growing up, explaining the meaning of the Ukrainian flag to friends. The blue stripe across the top, these aren't just colors on a flag. The blue stripe, of course, is the blue open sky above the Ukrainian steppe, and the gold stripe underneath are the wheat fields or sunflower fields that we tended, that gave us meaning as a farming pastoral people. So that's a story that I don't have to explain anymore to most of the world. I think many of you are seeing all kinds of new renditions and imaginings of this portrait of Ukraine, the land, the sky, and the golden fields. So our farm traditions are central to much of what we do as we celebrate the changing, the seasons and the life cycles of nature. So at Ukrainian Christmas, which we celebrate on January 7th, one of our traditions, the very first course of this 12-course meal is kutya. It's a little porridge made of wheat berries and sweetened with honey. And so what you're traditionally supposed to do, we don't always do this, we kind of symbolically do it, but the traditional way to do it in the village would be to take a clump of this porridge and throw it up on the roof with the hope that it sticks to the ceiling, and that is a sign of it will be a good harvest this year. So I always thought that was fun, thinking of that story, and mischievously always wanted to actually throw the porridge on the ceiling. We also celebrate our weddings with a traditional wedding bread, which I had at my wedding, which is made in this very decorative way, and it has this big, round, beautiful bread, and it has little bread flowers and birds they make decoratively all around it. You may have seen some fancy versions of this on the Great British Bake Off. It's called the Korovai, and traditionally it is decorated with fresh strands of ivy, a Ukrainian ivy, barvinok, which you might know as periwinkle here, with little purple flowers, and it's served during our wedding ceremony with a little container of salt, which represents the necessities of life that you are being blessed with as you start your new journey as a new family, and with honey, which represents the sweetness of life. And of course, the bread represents the sustenance. And so I grew up hearing these traditions and feeling our connection to the soil. But I also loved as a child how many of our Ukrainian stories and also insults were connected to this farm life. So I thought it was very clever and funny to be able to tell people when I was mad at them, "Nai tebe kachka kopne," which basically translates to "may a duck come and kick you," which is a really tough expression of Ukrainian anger if you've done something wrong. So connected to our farm traditions, Ukrainians are storytellers. The kobzars are our traditional minstrels who would travel across the country and tell stories and play the bandura and sing ballads and share stories of our history. And this is how we reproduce our culture and share it across the generations. So I'd like to share with you today a little Ukrainian story that I grew up hearing different versions of, have now become very popular, and your children, your grandchildren may have this version of called the mitten or Urukavechka, and it's a very common Ukrainian folktale that goes deep into our traditions and has been widely recognized and even commemorated with a national stamp in Ukraine just a few years ago. So let me read this out and then briefly tell you what I think it can share with us today. So the mitten. There once was a boy named Mykola. He wanted mittens as white as the snow. He came to his baba and requested that she knit him these mittens. Baba is the Ukrainian word for grandmother, which incidentally is one of those first words that babies often utter. I think that's significant. And he asked her for these white mittens, and she said, "But if you drop a white mitten in the snow, it will be hard to find," Baba told him. But Mykola had his heart set on it. He wanted his white mittens, and he wanted them so much that Baba made them for him. When she finished knitting on one of the coldest days of winter, Mykola went out to play. He was running in the fields and bounding through the snow and decided to climb up a tree. As he was scampering up this tree, he dropped one of his mittens, but he was so absorbed in his fun that he didn't notice. So as this mitten lay in this white snow, a little mole was crawling along and found it. This mole was feeling the cold, and he looked in the mitten, and he thought, "Oh, that's a perfect size for me. I'm going to just crawl in there." And he crawled in and curled up and felt warm and comforted in this soft mitten. So as he was enjoying his new little home, a white hare was scampering along, saw this mitten wiggling a little bit, poked his head in and said, "Hey, who's in there? Whose house is this?" And the mole said, "It's me, I'm here." And the hare said, "May I join you?" And the mole said, "Okay, all right." It moved over, made room, and in crawled the hare. Soon enough, a hedgehog crawled along to get warm. The mole and the rabbit looked at each other. The hedgehog asked, "Can I join you?" They said, "Okay, all right, we'll make room. There's room here. This mitten is a little stretchy. It seems to have space." Now, as all of this was happening, there was an owl up in a tree, and she was watching it all with her keen eyesight. She really didn't want to miss out on the party going on down below. So she swooped down nuzzled her head in and said, "Is there room for me to join you?" And the animals conversed with each other, the mole, the hare, and the hedgehog. They said, "Yeah, we think there's room. You can crawl in here." And they moved over to make space. As all of this was happening, there was a badger watching from his little cubby underground. You know how friendly badgers are. He was watching. He scampered over. He was feeling the cold too, and it seemed really nice and cozy in there. So he poked his head in and asked if he could join, and the other animals said, "Well, okay, all right, you can come." Now, as all of this was happening, another animal came by. It was starting to snow. It was getting a little more edge in the air, a little chillier, and an animal with a soft red coat came along. Any guesses what this animal might be? A red fox. So a red fox is not always best friends with these other animals, but he was cold. The other animals conversed with each other, and they decided, all right, we can make room. You can join us. Just be friendly. So the mitten was getting pretty full at this point. It was pretty crowded, but because it was made with such soft wool, it gradually expanded and stretched, and there was room for all, and they kept each other warm as it got colder and colder. Next, you'll never guess who came along. This big bear lumbered along, and he was sniffing around the mitten, and he sniffed, and he could tell something was going on. He stuck his little nose in there. They were all packed in tight, but that bear didn't really care. He said, I want to join you guys. Can I come in? And he sort of muscled his way in, pushed his way in, and they all snuggled in really tight now, keeping each other very warm, though. Now next, this mitten was pretty stretched, almost stretched to bursting. And the next animal that came along was just a tiny little mouse, just crawled out, this tiny little mouse. And I mean, who can say no? If you've got all these other animals in there, there's surely room for a tiny little mouse. So the little mouse crawled in and crawled right up and perched on top of the bear's nose. Now, unfortunately, this mouse's whiskers were tickling that bear's nose. And before long, he ushered a big sneeze, and all the animals fell out of the mitten all at once, and the force of them flying out of the mitten threw the mitten up into the air, and the boy in the tree saw the mitten, caught it. Oh, there's my mitten. And finally, he climbed his way down the tree and came home and showed Baba, look, you thought I would lose my mittens in the snow, but I've got both of my mittens here. I haven't lost them, and I had a beautiful day playing in the snow. Of course, as Baba picked up this mitten that was all stretched out, she thought, what happened here? Something's funny. So I read this story, and I was thinking about it, and I remember it from when I was a child hearing this story. And I think that there's a lot that we can read from it today. But one of the things that sticks with me as I'm in communication with my family in Ukraine and, hoping for their safety and doing all we can to help them during this time, that many of the things that we think are limited in terms of space, in terms of room for others, in terms of our own room to care, to give, and to continue to welcome and feel empathy, sometimes it feels like there are limits, like we can only do so much. And so I think this story is reminding us that actually we often have much more room to grow and stretch and welcome others than we sometimes think. And that we need to remember to be as welcoming as we can, even to those who we don't think will join our party or necessarily fit in well, like the fox or the bear. But there is room, and there is room to keep stretching and growing and welcoming. Although it does take work, and it can take a lot of communication. Sometimes we need to ask each other, where do we fit best, and where is there room, and does it make sense for this ticklish mouse to sit right on top of the bear's nose? But I think that this is a beautiful message, and that Ukrainians very much would like to share that they want to feel welcomed, and they thank you for all the time and care that you're giving them, and also that it is important that we not limit our empathy or our focus on just one group or one people, and that we understand that our empathy and our space and our room to welcome has a lot of room to grow. And so let that be a message that I share with all of you. Thank you very much for having me here. Thank you.
Beautiful message. Oh my gosh. Our children are invited to go to their classes now. I see Shannon Boston in the back of the sanctuary ready to receive you and lead you with that amazing message of there always being room for one more in our hearts, in our homes. minute, we'll be lighting candles. So if you have more prayers to share online, please feel free. Start this morning with a prayer of thanks to Xenia and her family. Candle for her family and all the people of the Ukraine, for their safety and well-being and for peace. And another candle for all the soldiers, including the Russian soldiers who are fighting a war, that they're caught up in a war that they haven't created, for them and their families, for all the people of Europe who have so many memories of war and its devastation, who are feeling a lot of fear these days. For all of us watching around the world, feeling helpless. Also light a candle this morning for Nicole Vreeland and her family on the loss of her mother, Pam Halverson, who died on Tuesday, March 1st. Nicole also has a 3-week-old baby, so we widen our embrace, our mitten, and hold that family. We also stretch that mitten a little further for Francia and her family on the loss of her aunt Mary Lee Caldwell, who passed on March 2nd. It's incredible how stretchy this mitten is. This mitten of our hearts stretches even wider to hold Laura Border and her family, her 2 sons, on their grandfather's death. Laura's father died this past week. Thank heavens our hearts are so resilient and so stretchy. We light a candle also for the family and friends of Harry Crampton, longtime member, who passed on March 3rd, and whose memorial will be this Wednesday at 11 o'clock in the morning. And for Zach Reeves, asking for prayers for the Stearns family on the passing of his grandmother, Janie. More prayers for all the refugees who are coming to Italy. Our Unitarian friends in Italy have refugees coming to their hometowns, Borgo Sesia, and they are activating to help them. And from Mike Workman, prayers for his wife, Christine, for her continuing improved health after a recent stay in the hospital. I invite all of you now here present to speak aloud the names of people you would like to bring into this sanctuary of memory and light and hope. And I will light a candle. Trish Leeser. Natalie Semenu. And a candle for all those names not spoken, but carried in the stretchy chambers of our hearts. Thank you, Reverend Davis, for being here to pray with us and for us this morning.
As we settle ourselves into a sacred space, I'm also thinking of my godson, Gregory Robinson II, and his brother, Setlaw Robinson, on the loss of their mother, Deborah. this past Friday. Let us bring ourselves then to this place of sacredness. O gracious God, Spirit of life and love, you have told us in so many ways that we are loved, that we are cherished, and that we are yours. In this time when we have gathered to sing our songs and tell our stories, we are able to pause for just this moment to say that we are letting go of all those trials and tribulations that haunt us, so that we may receive the unbridled love that you give especially to each one of us. Gracious God, we need this right now, because on this first Sunday of March, we remember that on the first Sunday of March in 1965, people who just wanted to be able to express their vote were beaten on a bridge in Selma, Alabama. Those people who were beaten so badly on that bridge still kept going because they understood that they are yours, and no person can deny the blessing, freedom that you have given all of us. So we recognize that on that bloody Sunday, we are part of those people right now. Because on a land not that far away, there are people who are huddled, who are being driven from their country, who are saying, why? Asking for you to give them a blessing that they may be able to triumph. And we are here this morning to say you will. God hears you. And God, we are saying we need this right now. No one should be able to deny another person of their God-given love that makes them a person of humanity. No one, no autocrat can deny anyone the blessing that you have given each one of us. And we will speak out, and we will move in a united front to confront any force that would deny us that right. So we are praying this morning for the people of Ukraine and all the people in this world who are being oppressed, that you are a God who says you will fight oppression, and we will face these powers. We will face them with freedom. We will face them with compassion. And of course, we face them with that transforming power of love. There's room for all of us. There's room in us. And so we pray. Amen. Blessed be Ashe.
You may have seen a video that's been shown. It was captured by a reporter from the Washington Post this week as bombs were just started, the invasion was beginning on Kharkiv in the Ukraine. This reporter from the Washington Post came out into the lobby of the hotel where he was staying, hearing the noise and the air raid sirens and everything that was going on. And as he walked out of his room, he looked down. There was a long stairwell, and in the lobby, a beautiful white piano, and there was a young boy playing on the piano as the invasion was just beginning. And he remembered how his mother used to play the piano when he was a kid, and it used to calm him down. And he just sat and watched and captured this little bit of video. And I want to show you this boy playing and bring us to what's happening in our world right now. Here we are, either here or online, safe, hopefully, wherever you're watching from. I know we have people all over the world watching with us. I hope wherever you are, you're safe. It's nice to feel safe in this moment. And our hearts go out to all those who are in harm's way. I found myself really conflicted this week. In my 25 years of being a minister, I have, at times of war and rumors of war, I have regularly been a part of the peace demonstrations. In fact, right out on the front lawn of All Souls, we worked with the Peace Fellowship. You remember, Rick, with the Peace Fellowship of Tulsa, we hosted a peace rally before we went into war in Afghanistan, trying to ask our country not to go. Before we went into war with Iraq, and we marched down through Brookside. I remember on one of those, we wore sackcloth as we marched and sat together, and the lawn was just filled with people from Tulsa who were against the war. But this week, I was asked to come speak on behalf of the Ukrainian community here in Tulsa and worldwide, to help arm the Ukrainians and to help the folks who were organizing this were wanting to get a no-fly zone advocated for and all of those things. And I found myself conflicted about, this is the first time I've ever been advocating for the increase in military weaponry and actually help people in a fight, in a war. So I wonder how you've been feeling. I imagine that you've been wrestling with all kinds of conflicting feelings about what's happening, not about, I don't think, standing up with people who are fighting for their freedom, but just the whole idea and all the hypocrisies, too, that go along with being part of the United States of America and the things that we've done. You may be wrestling with some of the thoughts about how there are military conflicts going on all over the world. There's bombings and destruction happening all over the world, and we're not paying much attention to those. They don't make the news, and yet we're all paying attention right now to this conflict, and that can feel awkward. Some people have made the point that, is it because these are white people? And is it because these are Christians that we're paying attention in a way that we don't? Do we value these lives differently or more than these other lives? And there's a real important conversation to be had about that. To reduce this to that would be way too reductionistic, but it's an important point, and it's something I know we wrestle with. You may be wrestling with the thought about the way in which we went into Iraq under false pretexts, right? We told the world there was weapons of mass destruction, and that we were going in because we've been living in a period where we've said since 1945 very clearly that a stronger power can't just go in and invade a sovereign nation. But we made the case that we could invade because there were weapons of mass destruction, and then we went in and invaded a sovereign nation. And so now this is happening. Russia has done this, made up a false pretext to go in and invade a sovereign nation, and now we're up in arms about it. But there's a sense of hypocrisy that I know people are feeling, and you might be feeling. And then there's the idea of how the U.S. military and the CIA have gone in to topple democratically elected leaders around the world, whether it was Iran or Latin America or other places, for decades, and then propped up autocratic leaders who were favorable to the United States. So we see this happening right now in Russia going, do we have a leg to stand on to try to protest what's happening? And it's a very conflicting kind of a situation, and we have to wrestle with all of this. And we have to think about, if we are going to advocate for peace, that our peace and justice movement has to be big enough to also look at ourselves and things that we've done. I thought it was powerful yesterday that the Ukrainian community chose to have this rally in solidarity in Greenwood in Tulsa, at the memorial to the 1921 race massacre that happened here. The one place in America, in North America, that has been bombed and destroyed, just wholesale wrecking 45 square blocks of homes and businesses, like we're seeing is happening in Ukraine right now. It's the only place. Pearl Harbor was bombed in Hawaii, but in the contiguous United States, it's right here, just a few miles down the road. But they held this rally in Greenwood. And we made the point that we're doing this in solidarity with the survivors and descendants of what happened here in 1921. Because we wanted to say, we're not standing only in solidarity, as Dr. Kish said so well, there's room for more, and we wanted to make sure that we were doing our justice movement also in solidarity for reparations and other reconciliation that still needs to happen in our community around those who've been bombed and their homes and lives upended and destroyed. And also we made a point of acknowledging that we were doing this on Creek land, and Cherokee also is part of that park. It's sort of divided between Creek and Cherokee land. And we wanted to make the point that we're standing in solidarity with Native peoples who also had their land invaded, taken over. And so there's complexity in all this. And we want to stand for justice and peace, but do it not in a false or hypocritical way, but in a real way. And so all of that is sort of wrestling around. And I thought that was really important. And I want to just make the point that there's some things that make this situation unique and different and important for us to be focusing on. One of the things that just in case there's any confusion, I mean, there's been over 1,000 years of unique Ukrainian history. Not Russian history in Ukraine, but Ukrainian history. It's its own nation, regardless of what Vladimir Putin is saying about Ukraine. Kiev was a bustling metropolis and a strong urban center at the time when Moscow was still a farming community. So the idea that somehow Ukraine owes its culture and its livelihood to Russia is flipped almost completely on its head. It's true that a lot of Russian culture was influenced by Ukrainian origins and history, but it's really important to acknowledge that there's a long and strong and proud history of the Ukrainian people that has nothing to do with Russia coming in and being a part of that. And then the other thing is that there's an attempt to annex this Ukraine and make it a part of Russia, saying that you don't have a history. You're not really a nation with a people and a culture and a history. So even when we went into Iraq and Afghanistan, foolish as it was, we didn't go in and say, there is no Iraq, there is no Afghanistan, you are Americans and we are making you the 51st state of America. That's not what we were doing. And this is a different situation. And this situation has the potential to destabilize the entire world. These are superpowers involved. There's nuclear weapons involved, potentially, the potential for that. And NATO and a superpower and all these folks facing off, this has the potential to destabilize the world. So we should be paying attention. We need to be paying attention, and we have to continue to try to advocate for peace in whatever way we can, but not a peace that allows the Ukrainian people to be run over and destroyed and disseminated. I saw there was a sign at the protest yesterday that said, if Russia stops, then the war ends. If the Ukrainians stop fighting, then Ukraine ends. And that's an unacceptable ending for the Ukrainian people, and could have major impact on democracy in the free world. But so could continuing this. So the best thing that could happen is peace as soon as possible. And I think about it's a real David and Goliath kind of a story, right? You've got this superpower, and then you've got this country the size of Texas trying to fight the military of Russia. But if you know the story of David and Goliath from 1 Samuel, starts in chapter 17, and it's quite a story. And in the story, a young shepherd boy, becomes king eventually because of what happens. And of course, in this story, we have a comedian who became president. So it's there's some parallels like that. And the thing is that in the story of David and Goliath, you have the Hebrew people are fighting the Philistines, and they're each one on the side of a hill, and there's a valley in between, and every day the Philistines send down their strongest warrior, Goliath. They say he was 9 feet tall. He had like brass armor, and he was fully covered with the finest armor. The only part of him that was even exposed was the little bit that had to be open so that he could see through his armor. Well, none of the Hebrew people none of the military wanted to fight him. The deal was that they said, any one of you come down, if you defeat Goliath, then you take our people. If we defeat you, we take your people. Well, no one in the military wanted to take on that battle. Everybody was afraid. But then David comes, this teenage shepherd boy who was just really showing up to bring lunch to his family, his older brothers who were in the military, and he ends up saying, I'll take this guy on. And he does so with, all he has is a staff. He tries on the armor, but it was just too hard to fight with all that on, so he just said, I'll just go down there. He had a staff and a sling, which shepherds had, and 5 smooth stones that he picked out of the river. And with that, he was able to fling a stone. Of course, Goliath was like, who are you? Who do you think you are to even walk down here in my presence? But he flings a stone, it goes right into that one little hole, hits Goliath in the forehead, and knocks him out, and he wins. So I want to talk about the 5 smooth stones, if you will, of freedom. What are the Ukrainians and those of us who are fighting on the side of or rooting on the side of freedom and democracy in Ukraine? What are the smooth stones that will help possibly this David fight this Goliath of Russia? And now I know that for a lot of people, the story is sort of framed that this is about faith in God and that it was because of God that David defeated Goliath. And even though this is a church, I don't want to talk so much about what God's role is, because I don't know what God's role is in a war. A lot of people think that God's, on the side of somebody or other in a war, and I just don't think God works like that. I'm seeing children being bombed in their homes, and if God's involved in this, making decisions, it doesn't make sense to me in that way. I can understand that people are drawing upon their faith in God for comfort, for compassion, for courage in the face of the battle. But the idea that there's some God who's taking sides in this in some way and is orchestrating any of this, to me, that's a bad theology. So I'm not going to talk about that kind of faith, but I do want to talk about faith in freedom and faith in democracy, and what are the democratic values and beliefs that folks in Ukraine and the rest of us who believe in them can hold on to, and that may very well be able to, and have in the past been able to defeat autocracy, dictatorship, and fascism. And they are, some of the basic ones are, one of the smooth stones is popular sovereignty. The idea of democratic decision-making, the fact that people can have self-determination to decide what they want for their country, that no dictator from some other country can come and tell you what your government's going to be, who your leaders are going to be, and what language you're going to use, how you're going to educate your people, and all those kinds, whether you're going to join NATO or join this up with this group or that state. So popular sovereignty is such an important part of what drives the faith and the courage to say, no, this is why this system is so important to us. And that's what the Ukrainian people want. And then freedom of speech, right? Because Russia don't have popular sovereignty. There's nobody electing Vladimir Putin, and there's nobody that can take him out. There's no way for that to happen democratically. And so, and then freedom of speech, freedom of the press, freedom to protest peacefully. They don't have that in Russia either. The press, they've shut down the free press, the last vestiges. They've shut down people are going to protest. They've been arrested by the thousands in Russia. So these are the things that the Ukrainian people want, that we value here, and that are being fought for right now. And that faith in saying we want this is right for us as human beings, and we deserve this, and we have the right to it. That is what is driving people, and that is what should be driving people, and what they have faith in, that the world and the good of freedom and sovereignty and democratic governance can give us. And then equality before the law. Right? We struggle with that here but we struggle with it. We keep moving in that direction. We have a lot of positive things we could say about the law and the judicial system here, albeit imperfect. But the idea of creating a system where people have equality among the law, which they don't have in Russia. I know it by the Ukrainian people say, we do not want them to rule us. We want to create our own system. And of course, they're struggling as a new democracy to figure it out. There's plenty of corruption and issues that they've been dealing with. But it's their right to make those decisions. And then this idea of checks and balances and the separation of powers, which again doesn't happen in Russia and in an autocratic society. And so and then the other thing is, I think what Dr. Kish talked about is storytelling. The Ukrainian people are storytellers. And that is in democracy, we tell our stories, we share our stories, we discuss things openly and debate, and it's through that we have make better decisions than somebody who becomes isolated like a dictator and is trying to make the decisions on behalf of everybody. So these are the 5 smooth stones of freedom and democracy that I hope we can have faith in, that will win the day in the end, one way or another. Now, I titled this message, "Are We at War?" And you would think we are at war in the United States with each other. Right? There have been all these articles recently about, are we about to have a civil war in the United States, right before all this happened with Ukraine. We've been talking about civil war, that we're so divided. The culture wars have become so significant in this country. And I was listening to a TED Talk by the Israeli historian Yuval Noah Harari, who was talking about what's happening in the Ukraine. And he was saying, watching a nation fighting for their freedom maybe will help us to recognize here in the United States that we really do need each other and that we're a lot closer than we are further apart. And there's a lot of ways in which we could and should come together. We're in this together here in our fight for democracy and for freedom and all of those things. This is much bigger than left versus right. You know, here in this country, the right tends towards nationalism and the left tends towards liberalism. And so as Harari was saying, that they see themselves as in tension and fighting with each other and that they can't coexist. But I think one thing that he's saying that we can learn from this situation is we need both. We need both a sense that we can have our nationhood and it can be respected and it can be protected, which is what the Ukrainian people want, and we can have liberalism because that's our freedom. And we might not like the kind of freedom that everyone else has, and you know, some people are uncomfortable with different kinds of freedoms, and we were going to argue over, you know, women's rights and the rights of LGBTQ people and all kinds of other things but we have to recognize in this country that we need both. We need to protect our nation and have a sense of our national security, and we have to have a sense of liberalism, and we need both, and we need each other, and by being together, that's the only way we're going to stand united and protect liberal democracy right here in our own country. So, since 1945, the world has had all of history before 1945, the strongest powers could just go in and take over indiscriminately whatever they want, and they were just fighting and war everywhere. And since 1945, there's been this sort of period that some historians call this sort of relative peace. Obviously, there have been wars breaking out, but there hasn't been these big wars, and there's been this sense that just because you have all the power, you can't just go in and take over. So what's happened is that, you know, in order to maintain those old authoritarian imperial worlds, you needed a lot of military. Like 40 to 80% of the income of the king or the dictator or whoever was going into military just to support that kind of imperialism and that kind of life. Well, what's happened since 1945 is that we've seen that the budgets for military have been decreasing down to right now, up until just recently, in 2020, the average of across the world is 2% of GDP, gross domestic product, is what countries are spending on military. The problem of what's happening right now is that and what could happen because of what's happening right now in the Ukraine is that countries are already putting more money into their military. And if Poland starts increasing its military, other people are going to start, you know, what's going to happen very likely is that from this moment, we're going to start putting more money into military. And that means taking money away from healthcare, away from education, away from infrastructure, and all kinds of things that we need. And so this is, the ramifications of what's happening right now in Ukraine are enormous. And will be long-lasting if all of a sudden there's this move towards more militarization. And that is very likely an outcome of what's happening if we can't stop this right now and try to bring peace as soon as possible. So this peace that we've had since 1945 is more than anything because we've started to make better decisions. We've started to create better systems and systems of governance and justice and you know, the world bodies and things like that. Well, here's the thing, that we have to protect those systems. And right now, we're fighting amongst ourselves, and we're starting to see those systems being destroyed. You know, NATO was starting to fall apart before this. The United States democracy right now is still, you know, hanging in the balance. And so we need to recognize how important those systems are. We need to shore up those systems, and we need to recognize that if we tear apart our institutions from the inside here in the United States, then they're not going to be around to protect us and our freedom when we need them. So the world right now is going through a lot, but we have a role to play if we can stop tearing ourselves apart from the inside right here in the United States. And maybe we can use this as an opportunity to do that. We need each other. Liberal democracy is worth saving, and both in Europe and right here at home. And so the faster we can create peace in the Ukraine, the better. So here's what I want us to do. I want us to vote. I want us to advocate for the movement towards peace and the ending in the right way of this conflict, and financial support for the folks in Ukraine and those who are fleeing. And here at home, let's do our part, whatever we can do to help stop this tearing apart of our society around these culture wars. We're not at war. We're not at war. And we need to find ways as a nation to come together and to begin to unify and realize that, remind ourselves that left and right, that we need each other, and let's give thanks for what we have while we still have it. Thank you. Beautiful. Wow. Beautiful. Thank you. Well, in the midst of all that's happening and all the talk of war and destruction, we are still celebrating our 100th centennial and our 100th anniversary as a congregation. And we've been giving awards every Sunday for a while as we lead up to our 101st birthday at the end of the month. And I hope you can come on the last Sunday of March. We're going to have a wonderful service, one service at 10:30, and then a big picnic on the lawn. We'll have tents and all kinds of fun activities for the kids and food. And so really come out and celebrate with us. And then we'll give all these awardees. We'll recognize all of them. Our choirs are going to sing. It's just going to be a great day. But in the meantime, we've got a few more awards to give out. And today's award is really special, and it'll just take us a moment. But I want to say one word. This is the only award that we're giving posthumously. It goes to Trish Leeser, who in 1977 took over the day school that was run here at this church, turned it into something truly incredible that lasted over 30, I think it was 38 years she taught in this school. She helped raise about 2,000 of Tulsa's children and twice as many of that parents who she helped to raise. Like me, my kids went through there, and she helped me learn how to be a parent. And she was just a great partner with us, with other schools in the area. Such an admirable person. I see her husband, Dick, is with us. And Dick, we honor you, and as we honor Trish. We're sorry she's not here to be with us. We had a beautiful celebration of her life here at the church just on Friday, and we celebrate her again today. I direct your attention to the screen. We have a little tribute for her, and Dick, I hope you'll pick up the actual award at the end of the month.
With the All Souls Partnership Award, we honor our beloved Trish Leeser posthumously for her work with Channing Day School. Although Trish passed away on December 31st, 2021, and cannot be with us, we remember her many contributions to All Souls. Trish began as a teacher in Channing before purchasing the business in 1976. And as the owner and director of the school for 38 years, Trish impacted the lives of more than 2,000 preschool and kindergarten students and their families. Beyond providing an excellent foundational education, Trish and her staff instilled children with a love of learning, an appreciation for books and great art, the importance of kindness, and the practice of empathy towards others. She knew and appreciated young children, and she shared her expertise with many organizations, including 29 years on the Family and Children's Services Board and with a regular column in Tulsa Kids magazine. Parents all over Tulsa sought her counsel and advice, which was always delivered, ready or not, with frankness and an encouraging smile. Channing Day School attracted many people to All Souls. The school program was developmental for children 3 years old through kindergarten and children of all faiths. As a longtime member of All Souls Church, Trish was a tireless volunteer. She chaired the Children's Religious Education Board, volunteered in the church's Partners in Education program, and organized countless church dinners. Here at All Souls, we are grateful for the fond memories and loving legacy she leaves. May she rest in peace, for her life has been and will always remain a blessing.
How fitting that we're awarding that to Trish Leeser on the first day of Women's History Month. What a strong woman she was. And I remember her. She greeted me so warmly my very first coffee hour in Emerson Hall here in Tulsa 12 years ago. I will never forget her warmth and curiosity. It was amazing. Anyway, I know you all feel the same way. Those of you who know her, I have 4 important announcements for you today. Our UU Foundations class, which gives you the history of All Souls and the history of Unitarian Universalism, starts on Wednesday the 9th, March 9th, this Wednesday, and all 3 ministers, Marlon, Corey Lovell, and myself will be teaching. That's 3 Wednesdays in February. Introduction to Unitarian Universalism at 7 p.m. Mark your calendars. On March 23rd, Dr. Teresa Reed, longtime member here, member of the New Dimensions Chorale, head of the music department at TU, professor of music, now head of the department at the University of Louisville, is coming with her new book, You're Likely Not a Racist, to talk about that and receive questions from the audience. I'm sure that's on Wednesday, March 23rd. And then Shades, we are launching Shades, which is, I'm going to read you something written by Corey Smith, the person to contact about this, our youth director, African-American man on staff here at All Souls. The Shades curriculum is designed to heal Black people, Indigenous people, people of color of the trauma experienced through all forms of racism. The goal is to uncover and rediscover your racial worth and value. Corey Smith and other facilitators like Dorothy Shikoda and Jeannie Lee will create a space to share information about the history of racial trauma, trauma that many people have not yet recognized or dealt with or wrestled with in that kind of a supportive, healing environment. So with circles and reading and sharing and journaling and videos, healing can happen. That begins on Monday, March 21st from 7 to 9 p.m. It runs for 11 sessions all the way through August 11th. You can talk to Evelyn Caruso at the front desk or Corey Smith for more information, more details. And then Marlon mentioned this, but mark your calendars to the weekend of March 26th and 27th. We're having an art market on both days, Saturday and Sunday. On Sunday, we have only one service at 10:30 in the morning. There'll be 3 messages from Reverend Marlon, Bishop Carlton Pearson, and Reverend Tamara Labak, who many of you will remember. I will be online that day, so a really exciting Sunday, March 27th, with lunch and a circus on the lawn. Not to be missed. Not to be missed. Our offering, I know we're running a little over, but I need to say all these things. Our offering today goes to the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee, which was created in 1939 by Unitarian minister Waitsell Sharp and his wife Martha to help refugees escaping the Nazi regime in Eastern Europe. So please give generously as you're able. If you'd also like to make a donation to the church, please do so, and we will now gratefully receive this morning's offering.
Beautiful. What a treat to have a guest musician here, a true master. Thank you for being with us. Also, Dr. Kish, what a joy to have you with us, and thank you. That story, it really left an impression, and we will continue to pray for you and your family and all the people of Ukraine. In just a moment, we'll have our chalice extinguished, and the chalice was created by the Unitarian Universalist Service Committee during the time of World War II as a symbol. They used it, they needed some letterhead because they were sneaking Jews and others who were escaping the Nazis out and into safety. And they needed a letterhead, and they came up with this symbol of the flaming chalice. That's where it comes from. And so then it became something that we use in our churches after that. So as Europe is back involved in a land war and people are fleeing, let that chalice that we have be a reminder to us of the importance of freedom and of community, and let us all hang together and stay together and recognize how much we need each other. Let us be a source of hope and healing. And as you go forth into this day, go in peace. Amen.
As we extinguish our chalice, may peace prevail, may freedom follow, and may we exemplify the courage and hope that this symbol represents in the world.
You were just wonderful. Yeah, what a treat to have you here.
I'm glad I got played and playing music. I'm glad I got.
Yeah, maybe you'll come again. Do you live in Oklahoma?
No, I live in Texas.
That's what I thought.
So we just got a concert last night. That's why I'm still
Stayed
here.
on.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
I'm glad you know Rick.
Remarkable. You're a wonderful talent. Where did you study?